And we go to the Western Pizza hotline, and we are joined by Eric Francis, who I assume is in the great city of Calgary, even though he's got all that Hartford Whaler garb in the background. And before we get started, I don't want to steal anybody else's thunder here, but I've heard a couple of dribs and drabs that you once kicked for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Is that true?
Oh, it's one of my favorite stories in the world. I played... I kicked a field goal at a Stampeders game, and I won $50,000, a 48-yard field goal. And I'd only played soccer. I'd never played football in my life, and it was a bit of a, I won't say a miracle, but if you're a soccer player, it's not that hard. It didn't seem that hard anyway. And then I always want to do this George Plimpton thing where you go and you put yourself in the athlete's shoes. And so I convinced Ron Lancaster to give me a shot with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And under the guise that I was a journalist there, writing every day what it was like to be in the CFL, trying out for a team, doing 2-a-days. I trained for 3 months to get ready, or 6 months actually. And then I kicked in 2 preseason games and retired with the highest kicking percentage in CFL history. I was 1 for 1. I kicked against Doug Flutie and the defending champions. This was 1998, I believe. So I'm old, and it was a long time ago, and I can't believe that a pro sports team would allow that stuff to happen now, but it was a different day back then.
I think it should happen more often. I remember the Argos letting Ty Domi do it for some charity thing, and I think he was friends with Don Matthews. That's a really cool story, and you know what? On one hand, maybe it's tragic that you didn't have a long career in the CFL, but I have a feeling that being an NHL writer is probably more lucrative than any CFL career would have been. So it probably worked out just fine.
The contract I had signed in '98 was for $36,000 a year if I'd have made the team and pursued it. So yeah, I couldn't have afforded to take the pay cut. I think back then I was probably making $38,000. So it would have been a big drop. I don't know.
Big difference. Hey, I wanted to ask you, we'll talk about some of the takes you've had about the Canada's Olympic team, and I think the list is coming out New Year's Eve, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
What's your over-under that the NHL is going to send players to the Olympics? I keep hearing this ice issue keeps creeping up and doesn't seem to be going away.
I can't imagine that. Hey, that still looms large, the fact that the damn thing isn't even built right now. It's absolutely ridiculous, but that's out of the NHL's hands. And I think the NHL would be okay with just saying, you know what, this is unsafe, this is ridiculous, you guys blew it, we're not going. But I don't think the PA would be quite as content to just wash their hands of the Olympics and say, yeah, it's okay, we're not going to play. The ice would have to be extremely dangerous in terms of so jeopardizing the players' safety for there to be even a chance that they'd have that conversation that we're here, but we're not going to play. I mean, they're going to send all those guys over there and not play because the ice is a little mushy, or maybe it's too hard and it's breaking. I can't fathom that happening at all. The NHL has their ice people there, and whenever the ice plant and rink is actually ready to go, they'll be working 24/7 to try and make sure that they get it as good as they can. And look, they can make outdoor ice in Miami now, at Fort Lauderdale and all these places. They can make ice in Italy, I'm pretty sure of it. So I would say there's about a 1% chance that they're not going to play the Olympics this year.
At what point, if they were to pull out, if that 1% were to happen, what would be a deadline, do you think? Because they can't push it too far. I don't think that, I know they pulled out in the last Olympics, I guess it was, sorry, I had my years all mixed up. But the one year they didn't want to go because of the COVID and whatnot. They didn't want to go to China. I don't know how late it was when they pulled out. It was pretty close. But is there a drop dead date where you'd say, okay, well, if they haven't pulled out yet, they're not gonna?
It's a great question. And I would say that, I honestly think if they were going to drop out, they would drop out 2 days before. I think they would give it every opportunity. I think you'd have all the guys there and their families there. And I think it literally would have to be 1 or 2 days before the puck was actually supposed to drop on the tournament before they said, we absolutely have exhausted all the possibilities and this ice is just not safe. Or worst case scenario, the ice is not even ready, or the building's not ready, or it's not safe, it hasn't been approved. I think they'd push it to the last minute. So if they did pull the pin, I'd be surprised if they did it anything more than a day or two before. I really think they'd push it to the limit.
You mentioned that the Players Association will want to go, and the players really, really want to go. I know you don't cover the other leagues as much or the other sports as much. Do you think any other players association in the NBA or Major League Baseball or even the NFL would care that much and probably would have, I would opine, have members who would want to get out of it? Like, it's just so different, isn't it? Isn't that the one thing that's different about hockey players, how badly they want to play in these international competitions?
Well, yeah, and the dream team in basketball and everything, that's such a big deal that I have a hard time believing that the basketball players don't, like, I think they put a lot of stock in the Olympics too, and they wouldn't just walk away. Baseball players, maybe they would. I don't care. Maybe they don't care that much. But I know with hockey, look, it's been since 2014 since we've had NHLers there. So all the best players in the world are just dying to not only have best on best like we did at the Four Nations, albeit just 4 teams. They're dying to do it on the biggest stage possible, which is something some guys grow up dreaming of. You talk to almost any NHLer, and they'll tell you they dream of winning a Stanley Cup. You don't hear very often of a guy talking about, I dreamt of winning an Olympic gold. But, I think that is going to be more and more a thing. When you talk to European players, a lot of them don't ever talk. They didn't grow up wanting to win a Stanley Cup. They grew up wanting to win a world championship. Like, that's a big deal for them. So in that same vein of world championships and Olympic play, representing your country, especially since these guys have gone so long without doing it, yeah, I think in the NHL, more than maybe other leagues, like you say, it would just mean that much.
I don't want to beat this dead horse much more than I already have, but I feel like the perfect balance is to do it like once every 4 years. Don't worry about Four Nations Cup. Don't worry about something every 2 years, because my worry is if they do it too often, and they've done this before, it starts to lose some of its luster. Do you have a take on how often we should see the international best on best? I think 4 years is the perfect number.
No, I don't. Look, we've been so devoid of that best on best for well over a decade that I'm saying I want every 2 years. Like, my greatest memory as a sports fan when I was younger was I got to promise myself to stop using years because it makes me so old. But the 1987 Canada Cup, I was 17 years old, and I was in the stands when Lemieux scored the goal. God, I hope you know the goal I'm talking about.
The Gretzky to Lemieux?
Yes, thank you. I knew you did. I'm just
Larry,
kidding. But
who was trailing? Who was trailing? The defenseman?
Larry Murphy, the
wheelman.
There
you go. I didn't know if you'd get that or not. So
okay, God bless you.
I think Howard Chuck was on the ice too.
Yeah, and I still to this day say Lemieux should have passed it to Murphy. I swear to God, he should have passed. It was the higher percentage play. But then again, if you got the puck on the stick of the greatest player at the time, well, the greatest goal scorer at the time, and still maybe the greatest goal scorer, we can have that argument later, but you let Mario Lemieux shoot the puck, and it was the right choice. But anyway, my point is the Canada Cup, World Cup, I know some people, it shocked me when people last year were thinking the Four Nations was going to be like hokey or some kind of, just some ridiculous made up thing. I knew from the start when they announced that this was going to be huge. And I think if they do it every 2 years where it's 8 cities or 8 teams, I think it'll be amazing. So I like to do it every 2 years. Every 4 years, it's the NHL that runs it. And every 4 years, it's the IIHF that runs it. I'm okay with both of those.
Yeah, I always felt like they just got really lucky because the political climate fell the way it did. But I think you're right. It had been so long since we'd had a best on best. It would have been a big deal regardless. But either or.
Yeah, it was so good. It was so good. And I'm with you. Like, the politics really ramped it up. Like, it was a perfect storm of things that came together. Canada versus USA, all the vitriol, the politics. But at the end of the day, what sustained it all was incredible hockey that you couldn't take your eyes off of.
Right, for sure. I was looking online. You feel like Drew Doughty needs to be on this roster? Why?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I had a good one-on-one with him last week when we were in LA, and he's one of only 3 guys who were on the team the last time Canada had an Olympic team, and it was him, Crosby, and Tavares. And I don't think Tavares is going to be there this time, but I think being there before counts for something. He's one of the most decorated players in the history of hockey. 2 Stanley Cups, 2 Olympic gold medals, World Junior. He's won Norris, been 4-time Norris Trophy finalist. Like, he's been there, done that. He's not rattled by the situation. They're not putting him on the top 2 pairings. He's a 3rd pairing shutdown guy. And I still think that the experience he brings, there's so many other things that he brings that I think other guys can't. And he's versatile too. If they really needed to, he could run a power play. I'm not sure you want him to, but he could still do it if you had to. He can kill penalties, block shots, and that guy's as competitive as anyone in the NHL. He'll bleed to death just to win this thing. So I think he should be in there. I said, look, I'm only going to counter by saying you're 36 years old. And he's like, I know, man, I'm old. I get it. But I also have a lot more experience than anybody else on the team, and that counts for something too. So, and I watched him last week when we were in LA with Calgary, and I still think he's got it at a high level.
I think Scott Niedermayer played in Vancouver in 2010, and he was probably at that age 37, 38, or in that year. I'd have to go look it up again just to fact check myself there. But I think there's an argument to be made. The older players can find a little bit of adrenaline to ratchet it up for 10 days or whatever they have to in those international tournaments. They're not punching a time
That's right.
clock. So
I agree. And last year, he joined that Four Nations tournament. He'd only played 6 games after having his ankle mangled. As he put it. And he played 6 games and played like 27 minutes a night to show Hockey Canada, I still can do this. And I don't think he was out of place at the Four Nations. I don't think anybody would argue that he was. And I actually think all 7 defensemen from that tournament should be on the Olympic team as well. And I'm pretty sure all 7 will. They can bring 8. So I think those 7, and we could argue all day long who the 8 should be, but I think I think he should be a lock.
One more guy I wanted to ask you about, Macklin Celebrini. Why do you feel like he needs to be on the roster?
He's the most exciting player in hockey right now. That's a little disrespectful to Nathan McKinnon and Connor McDavid, who still put on a show every time they touch the puck. But this kid, you can't take your eyes off him. Like the game I was in San Jose with just the other night, 4 points, maybe the best goal I've seen all year. It was a bit of a fluky goal the way it went in, but the move he made to get into the clear, a spinorama going backwards. This kid does it all. And if you talk to anybody in the league, like he's a 200-foot player. I wouldn't argue that Connor Bedard, even if he was healthy, I would not argue for him to be on the team at all because he doesn't have the 200-foot game. He doesn't have the speed. He doesn't have the work ethic, the tenacity, all the ingredients that Macklin Celebrini has. Celebrini is going to be the best player in hockey for a lot of years. He's not maybe right now, but he's right on the cusp, and he's going to take that mantle for a long time. And I got to tell you, that's exciting because he is a hell of an ambassador for this game. He's always wearing a beautiful smile. He's patient with the media. I think he's good-looking kid. I think he's got everything that the NHL wants. The only problem is he's buried in San Jose. We need to get him into a prominent market, but I guess that's not going to happen.
Could be worse. He could be buried with my Canucks. I'll get to that in a moment. But Craig Conroy, I know they announced his extension as GM. And look, I don't think anybody blames him for the fact the team hasn't risen again to relevance since he's been the GM. He's only been the GM for a short time. That said, how much runway does he have, do you think? I know you want to give him time to conduct a proper rebuild. The arena's coming. I've heard him make comments about he would love to be able to even just take possible free agents down the street and show them that the arena is being built, but it wasn't far enough along yet. Do you have a timetable in your mind where the team has to start winning again before people start to get impatient with the management like they always do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone's trying to, everyone's playing the opening of the arena. You want a genuine excitement about the team and the direction they're heading when they're opening a new building and trying to sell tickets to this fancy new thing that's clearly going to cost a lot of money ticket-wise. So ideally, that's the timeline. Look, they're not going to rebuild. I mean, they're retooling on the fly. I always call it the hybrid rebuild, the high build, I call it. And that's what they're sticking with, for better or worse. It frustrates a lot of people in this city that they're not leaning into the terrible start they have. People in this city, there are still probably 50% of the fans that cringe every time they win. But right now they're on a pretty good clip. They're one of the hottest teams in the NHL right now. So you say, when will they start winning? I mean, I know that this little spurt doesn't really matter over the last 15 games, but, they need to, you want them to be a contender is what you're saying, or at least a team that's not just going to squeak into the playoffs. which is what the goal's always been around here for 20 years. You want them to go into the season being a team that people are like, wait, they could do some damage. That's probably 3 or 4 years away, and at the very least. And Conroy's got 2 more years after this year to that's the runway he's been given. And we'll see where they're at that point. If they're still, I still think they're on an upwards trajectory, and I think that's the important thing. Everyone knew they weren't going to be a contender this year, but as long as they keep moving forward, people are generally content. Although with the little scare we got at the beginning of the year at how bad they were, people were talking McKenna a lot about it around here. It was pretty funny.
Well, I have to say, I grew up with open hostility toward Alberta and their sports teams because I remember the West Final in the 90s. It was Edmonton at Calgary, Edmonton at Calgary, Calgary at Edmonton. It was just nonstop. And the NHL teams were really good in the early 90s. So I know that history has been made these last few years with both Alberta teams missing the playoffs last year, both Alberta Canada West football teams missing the playoffs these last 2 years, which I cover. And I have to admit that I'm enjoying it a little bit just because of the environment I grew up in when all my friends were moving to Alberta. And I almost came to Alberta, but I'm embarrassed to admit I had almost 20 speeding tickets by the time I was 22. So my auto insurance was going to ramp up. That's what kept me out of Alberta. But do you sometimes feel like the bar has been lowered a little bit from where it used to be with these Alberta teams?
Well, look, I mean, the Oilers have been in the final the last 2 years. That's not, and they still have a lofty goal to try to live up to this year, and it's going to be awfully tough, I think, for them to do that. But, the bar's certainly been low for Calgary for a long, long time. When we had that Battle of Alberta, oh my God, was it 4 years ago now?
Great series, I remember that. Well, the matchup was good. I know it was only a 5-game series, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like, and it was so exciting because it had been, I think, 30 years since the last one. And I remember writing stories about the last one and Theo Fleury and all this, and people were so excited. And the feeling then was that this is something that we could be looking forward to for the next handful of years because both teams were really on the up and up. And then Tkachuk left, and Gaudreau left, and then Lindholm left, and Hanifin left, and the list goes on. And now the Flames are in a significant retool. So it could be a long, long time before those two are both contenders. Right now, one clearly still is, one clearly still isn't.
Yeah, I think the reference to my conversation actually had very little relevance to the NHL. I was more around the football, I guess, because like you said, the Oilers are still not too bad. And I'm always cheering against the Oilers not to win in the finals. Not that I don't want them to succeed or anything like that, but I'm probably like the people in Calgary. I want my team to be the one that ends the 30-some-year drought. And the one thing I was going to ask you about before we let you go, the Canucks. Like when I was young around the Christmas table, my Uncle Bob, God rest his soul, was a huge Toronto Maple Leafs fan. And we would mock him nonstop. We'd come up with things to mock the Leafs about, and he was always a good sport about it. And I'm the Canuck fan because I grew up a Vancouver fan, even though I barely follow them anymore. But it's almost like I'm the butt of all the jokes about what's happening to the Canucks. Whether I like it or not, I'm stuck with them. I can't get rid of them even if I wanted to. And I asked this question to Farhan in the first hour, and you have a little more distance from the situation because you don't live in Vancouver. We've heard the stories about players having Winnipeg on their no trade clause around the league. We've heard stories about how players didn't want to go to Edmonton. That was before McDavid and before the new arena and everything else. And I'm sure Calgary has had those issues. I remember in the 90s and et cetera. Sure. Do you think that Vancouver has a problem with that? Just being the fact that they're on the West Coast, they're so far north, they've probably got as bad a travel schedule as just about anybody. And you never see the sun in the wintertime. It just rains and rains and rains. Do you think those are real issues?
Yeah, and right now they've got a real culture issue, in that dressing room that's been a mess. They traded the wrong guy last year, and there's a whole bunch of issues going on there. But it's a gorgeous city, and it's a world-class city. You're right, it's dark in the winter, and it rains a lot. I don't know how many people are putting it on their no-trade list, but if they do, I would say one of the number one reasons would be the scrutiny, the media. There always seems to be a firestorm there. And whether it's, self-made in that dressing room and the team is to blame, or if it's a combination of the team being pretty dysfunctional and the media just taking that and going nuts with it. And the fan base is pretty rabid too, don't get me wrong. They haven't burned anything for a while as far as I know, but at least online and stuff. They're a pretty scary mob. So I think that is one of the things that a lot of guys want to steer clear of. But generally speaking, I would say I have not heard of a lot of players who would, like a lot of players have about 10-team no trade list. I'd be pretty surprised if a lot of guys had Vancouver on a list that small.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a great city, and I even heard with NBA players, they didn't like it, but near the end, some of them actually spend a lot of time back in Vancouver and say, no, we liked it. That was all overdone. I guess it's like anywhere else. If you're winning, that fixes everything, and they just have to fix all their other internal issues. Hey, this has been lots of fun. Have a Merry Christmas, and enjoy some time away from the rink, will you?
Yeah, you too. Good chat, and we'll talk in the new year.